We have Dr. Todd Lee here today. You're not going to want to miss this episode of Guru Talk. I created Species Nutrition with one mission in mind: to provide bodybuilders and serious athletes with no-nonsense supplements that work. I put my name and reputation on every bottle of Species Nutrition products. If you want to be your absolute best, join the evolution. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Guru Talk. We haven't done one of these in a while, and we're back with a vengeance. I'm Dave Palumbo, joined today by Dr. Todd Lee, someone I've been following for a while, and we align on a lot of things, all related to anabolics and training and bodybuilding. So I figured let's get him here. Let's talk about some of these topics. What's going on, Todd?
How are you doing today, Dave? I'm doing good.
I'm glad we finally got to do this interview. I had it on my to-do list for about over a year now, and I had people texting me and saying you should get them on, and I'm like, I know, and I said finally I got to reach out to you, and I saw a reel you did on Instagram, and it resonated so strongly with me that I was like, oh my God, I got to do it. Now's the time.
Which reel was that? The Space Marine reel?
No, just it was a reel about you talking about Masteron, I think it was, or something like that, and just about how ridiculous people are with thinking that it's funny in today's steroid world, whatever's not available, people think is the best anabolic you could possibly use, and I think Primobolan is probably the least accessible because it's the most expensive and it gets the counterfeited the most, so everyone thinks that's the magic drug, and it's really. Back in the day, I used to remember in 1992, I went to Barcelona. We were sharing Primobolan over the counter for $1.80 a vial, and they were no one even used them. We would just give them to girls and stuff like that. But it wasn't a strong anabolic nowadays because it's so hard to get. It seems like everyone wants to use it.
I always call them primo princesses because it's they like to show off about their primo and their therothem, they've got a Gucci purse and they've got a Prada hat or some shit, and then they're just bragging about brand identity. It's just so lame. It's not even a high-end brand, it's they grew up in a trailer if they wear a Gucci shirt, because Gucci's actually not that high-end of a brand. It's rich clothes for poor people. And it's kind of I think the same thing about Primo and Therothem is they think they're hot shit, but they ain't shit.
What do you think about Primobolan, and what is why does it have this mysticism on it? You think it's because it's just hard to get?
I think it's because a bunch of influencers got together and they pushed it. And they're if we all agree that this is the best thing and we control the collective subjective, then then when people hear it enough times, they believe it's true. It's kind of like CNN, MSNBC, and all those channels would repeat the exact same soundbite. And then the weak-minded sheep believed what they were told. So all the people using Primo, they're just sheep that fell for this bullshit that it's so great. First of all, there's this class which is misnamed. It's the DHT derivative class. It's a stupid fucking name for that class because they're not derived from DHT. They're just 5-alpha reduced. That the double bond in position 4 has been broken, and now it can't be aromatized. But it also typically DHT can't survive 3-alpha HSD inside the nucleus of the muscle cell. So you have to modify a DHT molecule to make it survive in that environment. So the boldenone class has a double bond between positions 1 and 2 in the A ring. So really, because there's a double bond in Primo is 1-methyl DHB. It really belongs in the boldenone class. It's not part of the other class.
I know that.
Masteron, Anavar, Anadrol, Superdrol, they all have a methyl group bound to position 2. They're a separate class. Those are the DHT derivatives or the 5-alpha reduced anabolics. Then the boldenone, when you 5-alpha reduced boldenone, you get DHB. And if you add a 1-methyl group to that DHB, it now should survive first pass liver metabolism. And that's how Primobolan was made. Primobolan acetate was made to be an oral version of DHB. The problem was it really was so weak, they had to add on an athate tail to the carbon 17, and that makes it injectable. But the thing is, whereas DHB is 2 to 3 times as good at transcribing DNA compared to testosterone, Primobolan's only about 70% as strong as testosterone, which makes DHB 4 times stronger than Primo. Plus, Primo has an added flaw that a lot of people don't realize, is that one of its metabolites is an aromatase inhibitor. So as you add in Primo, you lose estrogen. Now, a lot of people, what they do is they overdose on testosterone because they think testosterone is the best muscle builder, and then they try to control the estrogen excess by using Primo. The problem is, when you do this, you drive the equation towards DHT production, and you're going to have more hair loss from that testosterone than you would normally get. The wise choice is to run just a HRT dose of testosterone to get just the right amount of DHT so your dick works, and just enough estrogen so your GH converts to IGF-1, and then you run something safer like Masteron, which doesn't have any influence on DHT. It doesn't have any influence on estrogen. It's just a purely anabolic thing. It doesn't even drive up red blood cells. The only flaw with Masteron is it drives down HDL and can drive up LDL.
Yeah, well, which is all the anabolics. But you know what? I think that what the point is valid. In other words, if you take a steroid that converts to estrogen and you block that estrogen pathway, more will convert to DHT. That's just pure logic, right? I mean, so if you're taking compounds that inhibit the estrogen pathway, I mean, why not just take a little finasteride or some saw palmetto to inhibit the DHT pathway?
Well, this finasteride blocks at the type 2 enzyme, which is located in the prostate, but it isn't at the hair follicle. That 5-alpha reductase type 1 is at the hair follicle. So what you really need is a dutasteride. Now, dutasteride is so potent that if you swallow it and it has a 5-week half-life, people are bound to get impotence that is intractable, meaning it won't go away. So what I like to use is topical dutasteride and topical isotretinoin with topical minoxidil, and then use a derma roller along with RU48851, I believe is what it's called.
I'm going to get that formula for you, but I will tell you this. You are 100% right. I took finasteride for 25 years, okay, since I had some hair grafts done in 2000, okay? And I didn't have an impotence problem. It didn't affect my sex drive at all. Some people, they say it does, but didn't affect me. I did notice my hair loss stopped. So it definitely did something for hair loss. Mm-hmm. Recently, like about a year ago, I had a hormone replacement clinic say, you should use dutasteride. It's way better for hair loss. And that annihilated my sex drive, man. Not the sex drive, it annihilated like my ability to have an erection. Like instantly. It was so noticeable that I was like, oh my God. And it took a long time before that came back. It was what is it doing that it's causing that?
So it is such an extremely strong 5-alpha reductase inhibitor that it wipes out all the DHT production. Now, the way I like to explain it is
my DHT wasn't that low. I mean, it wasn't that low on it when I measured it, but it was still affecting sex drive and stuff.
That's weird. Well, in my experience, it's that the DHT influences the sensitivity of the penis. Mm-hmm. And so it's part of a feedback loop that if it's sensitive, then it's going to be more prone to get hard. If it's insensitive, it's less prone to get hard.
Gotcha. Makes sense. My recommendation: stay away from dutasteride. I don't know how anyone can possibly take it. It really destroyed me.
I have figured out one way you can take it. If you want 50% DHT suppression and you have no choice but to use oral dutasteride, the only way to do it is take the 0.5 milligram pill on the first the 11th, and the 21st of every month.
Oh, 3 times a month.
Because the reason is the correct dose is 0.05 milligrams or 50 micrograms. But the smallest pill is 0.5. So the only way to get the right dose, unfortunately, is to do 0.5 every 10 days. And it averages out to being 0.05 per day. Now, I'm a daily injection guy. I totally don't like the idea of sporadic injections. That's why I tell people do the 1st, the 11th, and the 21st of every month. It's easier to remember. If you had to,
can't we just have someone make like you know how like they have Propecia for hair loss, but Proscar for prostate. Why don't they just make a hair dose of Dutasteride for hair loss? You know,
I don't think there's the money in it because what people are doing.
You don't think so? From hair loss, that's such a vain thing. I would think there would be a ton of money in that if they marketed it right. You know.
I think because they're making preparations, like Strut makes a preparation for topical, and it mixes in other things like the isotretinoin and the minoxidil. I'm basically coming up with my own version of what Strut's doing. And
does it work? You think it works topically?
I think it works fine because let me explain why I know. So when I had my hair transplant surgery and I was using my protocol, it definitely dramatically reduced the amount of DHT in my system because I had all these open wounds on my scalp.
Right.
So I know for a fact if you use the derma roller, then the topical application will work.
Interesting. But what about when you have a sealed head, essentially? You know,
if you have a sealed head, it probably won't work. The derma roller is the key.
What does the derma roller do? Explain.
It's basically 1 millimeter needles. It kind of looks like a lawnmower, I guess, or not really a lawnmower, like a tiller.
Is it like the micro needling that women get on their face?
Yes. You just do it on your scalp.
I see. Interesting. Yeah. I didn't even. So you do that with the topical,
right?
And it seems to penetrate. And what's the R? I was reading about it. What's the R? Isn't that like an anti-androgen? The RU? What was the RU stuff?
The RU 488-451 blocks the androgen receptor. But you got to keep in mind, like people are like, oh, why would you take steroids and then use that? That's stupid. It's like it's 1 milligram. So if you're injecting 1,000 milligrams of Masteron and 40 milligrams or 200 milligrams of testosterone, and you're taking 1 milligram of RU on your scalp, I don't think that you're going to have a 1,000-fold binding affinity. So where it's bumping all the anabolic steroids off the receptors in the muscles.
Have you noticed a difference? I mean, have you done a controlled experiment with yourself? Have you noticed any difference taking that RU, that prostaglandin on your head?
Well, I'm going to be honest. When it comes to our own cosmetic self-perception, I don't notice things. I know that the combination of doing electromagnetic microneedling on my scalp with lasers and red light therapy and doing all the other stuff like the GHKCU, the isotretinoin, the Dutasteride, the hair is growing back in the areas that I did not get the transplant. So the transplant was up front.
Scalp?
The crown. I'm going to probably go get a transplant on the crown anyway, but in the interim, because once you have to take 2 weeks off and it's going to fuck up your competition season. So you got to do it right at the beginning of an off season and then be ready for the next season to start.
Right. So you think it is possible to regrow some hair on the crown even after you've lost it?
I have. That's for certain. I've got before and after photos with everything I'm doing. It's working. Now I can't say this one drug is going to make it
right. You don't know which is working exactly, but
that's just not how I do things.
Right.
I don't
what do you think about PRP in the scalp or stem cells? You think they have any promise?
I've had both that done, and I'm not sure it worked more than I had it done when I had the transplant. I had stem cells harvested from some fat, spun down, and injected in with PRP.
Right. I'm thinking when I went to Mexico and I got like 300 million stem cells, IV into me. I'm wondering if they can spot inject that around if it'll do anything. I'm assuming if it worked, more people would be doing it, but I have to imagine it can't hurt.
I mean, I would do it, but I'm going to get a transplant at the same time.
Right.
Like I'm going to, like I'm a double tap type of guy. I'm not going to just put one round in the thigh and hope that they bleed out. I'm going to put, I'm going to empty the clip in the chest and the head.
Yeah. Are you going to go to like Turkey and do it? Or are you going to do it in the United States?
I did Turkey, but I found out there's a guy right up the street in Sterling Heights, Michigan, that does 12,000 grafts for $6,000. Wow. So I was like, why I flew all the way to Turkey when I could have just went 20 miles east. So I'm going to.
I have a guy in Turkey. The guy in Turkey, they want to do mine for free, but like I don't know if I have enough donor hair left at this point. Because I did it a few times in the 2000. I don't know.
Man, I don't care if there's any hair on the left of my sides of my head or my back of my head. I'll just look like Ragnar from Vikings. Fuck it.
Let's talk about daily shots, because I know you're a big advocate of daily shots.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's a pain in the ass. I mean, although I'm a neurotic creature like you, that I can do everything daily, but I think for most people, I always tell people every other day, because most people just can't handle doing something every single day. What's the advantage of every day?
Okay.
Is every other day acceptable to you? And what do you see happening when people do it more frequently?
Dave, have you ever seen someone win a race running on one leg? No. So they need two legs to run a race. So one leg is your anabolics and the other leg's growth hormone. That the growth hormone upregulates the androgen receptor, and the androgens upregulate the growth hormone receptor. So 2 + 2 = 16 when you use growth and test at the same time.
Right.
So if someone accepts that they want to stop aging, then they have to accept that growth hormone is the right tool.
Right.
So if you're going to be using growth hormone, and growth hormone's got to be used at least every day, then why the fuck not just load the testosterone in the same needle as the growth hormone and give yourself one shot a day?
Can you mix the water with the oil?
It doesn't need to mix, because they're not going to have a covalent bond between the two of them. They're just going to go into the tissue.
It'll affect the absorption, is what I'm saying.
You're injecting it, so it's 100% absorbed.
Right.
And needles, by definition, is 100% bioavailability.
Well, back in the day, we used to put Winstrol and testosterone in the same syringe, and we'd shake it up like salad dressing, and
right.
It would mix.
Which you don't need to do that, but you can just, I'd say shoulders, triceps. And because people are like, well, what if you're too fat to get to the muscle? I'm like, well, then you just push harder. It's amazing amazing what you get out of life if you just push harder.
You know what? You also said something else with regard to this that I discovered too, and I just did a little rant on it the other day. But 27 gauge insulin pins, are perfect for drawing up oil through. They go through it a lot quicker. That's how I take my testosterone replacement, through a 27 gauge. I don't pull the plunger out of the back. I just draw it up through that thing and I inject it into and you're also a big intramuscular. I'm big intramuscular too. I don't know why guys inject things subcutaneously. Can you tell me what the theory is behind that?
The theory is that there's sheep. And so the medical establishment knows that patients are lazy and stupid and cowardly. So they say, just grab your belly fat and inject that, because they assume everyone's so fat they can just grab a big wad of fat, and they're so stupid that they have to look in the mirror and see where they're injecting. They can't just close their eyes and find their body parts, that they have no proprioception at all. They have to see it in the mirror, and they have to inject in the big belly fat. And what the problem is, if you don't have any fat, this is what happens if you do a sub-Q injection. See that?
Yep. Yeah.
That's what happens if you miss the muscle and you have low body fat.
Yep.
It decomposes the skin. So nothing screams bodybuilding champion like having Freddy Krueger skin.
Right.
So if for bodybuilding, you want to go in the muscle. And so so people are like, oh, I don't want to be a bodybuilder. I'm like, oh, but you want to use Anavar and Androlone and everything your TRT doc prescribes you, regardless if it's the right drug or not, Mr. Not a bodybuilder. But So the point is, if
Plus,
you're going to be giving
it leaves marks when you do subcutaneous shots on your stomach. I don't know why anyone would inject their stomach at all. Who wants a bunch of marks all over your stomach? You know,
if they're fat enough, they don't see it. But the nurses are fat, so they tell the patients just inject their stomachs. There's a few in shape nurses, but when I was working in a hospital, the nurses look like Ursula from Little Mermaid. Ursula from Little Mermaid. There's evil, angry witches that are like blubberbusses. But so what I found was, if you just are like, hey, dude, you're going to be giving yourself a GH shot every day anyway, just load the test in the same needle and shut the fuck up and do it. And then people do it, and now they're like, this changed my life. My blood pressure is lower. My mood swings are controlled. It's amazing how much better daily injections are. The other thing I always say is only long esters, never short esters. And people think, well, but it spikes higher. It's like, I don't give a fuck if it spikes higher. If it spikes, more enzymes are created, like aromatase and 5-alpha reductase, to clear the excessive amount of test.
Exactly.
You want it to fly under the radar like a stealth bomber. If you fly above the radar, you're going to get shot down by SAMs. But if you fly under the radar, you can blow up nuclear facilities and no one even knew you were there till it's gone.
I say the same thing. First of all, the body works best, and I always found this out, because when I would take short-acting esters like propionate back in the day, I would get so much acne, and I would notice more side effects because it's up and down. Your body likes being even keeled. It doesn't like having hormone spikes all over the place, because it tries to, like you said, combat those spikes. And I'm a huge believer also in the long-acting injectables as well.
Yeah, long acting every day.
Less toxicity too.
Right. And people are like, but what about the half-life? Like, fuck your half-life. Like, why would you want it going up and then coming down and going up and coming down? It's like, have you ever been around a girl on her period? Do you want to be a girl on your period? Then fucking stabilize that shit.
Right.
Smooth.
Right. So if you had to put together the perfect cycle for someone to do who's a bodybuilder and trying to put muscle on, okay, we're not talking about HRT now. What would you say would be the perfect cycle? I bet it's going to be exactly what I would recommend, but I want to hear what you say.
This is my algorithm. Okay. You're going to run enough tests to where you get your estradiol up to the point where you start to feel slightly tender nipples, then roll back a dose. So let's say at 80 milligrams a test a day, you have tender nipples, roll it back to 60 milligrams a day. Now titrate up your GH and get your blood tested for IGF-1 every 5 days. So you go from 2 to 4 units. Oh, you got 300. Okay, you go from 4 to 6 units. Okay, we're at 350. Okay, we go from 6 to 8 units. Okay, we're at 415. All right, we're going to go from 8 to 10 units. You're only at 415 still. Roll back to 8 units. If you're using GH and your estrogen's capped out and your GH isn't giving you any extra IGF-1, you don't bother with the GH anymore. So now our hypothetical dude is doing 60 milligrams a test a day, 8 units of GH a day. Now we lay on the Masteron. Now, if they're super advanced and they've got a strong liver, I would say let's run 10 or 20 milligrams of DHB a day, because it's 3 times stronger than Masteron for anabolics. The problem is the DHB can get hard on the liver. So unless you're getting regular IV glutathione, TUDCA, NAC, if you hammer the liver support, maybe you can get away with 30 milligrams of a DHB a day. But all the experts like Broderick Chavez, who really likes DHB, he says his favorite upper limit for DHB is about 200. And I found that my liver took a huge crash when I went from 10 milligrams to 30. It didn't lower my estradiol like Primo does or EQ. So DHB is neutral like Masteron, and DHB is almost as strong as Tren without any of the side effects except the liver. So maybe run 30 milligrams tops of DHB a day, and you just fill in the rest of your need with Masteron. Now, one thing I really strongly advocate is that you don't use more drugs than you need to. So if you've got a logbook and you're making progress week after week after week, you do not need more drugs. You do not need more food. That adding more food is just going to make you add fat faster. It's not going to make you add more muscle faster. Adding more drugs will have you run into side effects sooner. So if you can stay at, let's say, 60 test, 8 units of GH, 20 milligrams of DHB, and let's say 100 Masteron a day, and you have perfectly clean labs and you're getting stronger and bigger on, let's say, 3,700 calories, and you're gaining nothing but muscle and no fat, don't get greedy. Just be patient. You're not going to make the muscle grow faster.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I agree with that to a certain degree. In my experience, okay, and I've tried a bunch of different things. I never used DHB back because they didn't really have it around in my day. And I don't know, from what I read, it seems like it is toxic. So you have to be careful with it. I don't know if I would be running it all the time. But I always got the ideal growth I got in my body was at 1,000 milligrams of testosterone a week. Now, I back then would take it every other day. I was always an every other day guy. So I did notice more regularity gave you better. I never even thought to do it daily, though. Why? I don't know. I just didn't think to do it. And I found that 1,000 milligrams of testosterone was ideal. And then I got really good results from EQ. I got really good results from Tren. Obviously, you get some side effects, but I always used lower dose on the anabolics, higher on the testosterone. And I found that I got good results from that. I put on a lot of mass from that. And it made me really strong. And I wasn't just by nature a very strong guy. Why do you think I got such good results from that type of plan?
I would say about 15 years ago, I got turned on to the classic Dave Palumbo cycle, which I think everyone still uses today, which was, and then this is probably not your fault. It's just it's 750 test, 600 EQ, and maybe 300 Tren if you're cutting. And the reason why this works so great is that the test is your primary anabolic and the EQ is an AI. So if you run slightly less EQ than test, then the EQ is going to control that estrogen level, right? And then a quarter of the EQ converts to DHB. So if you have 600 EQ, you're getting an AI to control the excess test, but you're also getting 150 DHB, which is the equivalent of 20 milligrams a day.
I didn't know that EQ converted to DHB. That's interesting.
Yeah, well, a quarter. Because there's 4 possible outcomes of EQ. It can turn into an AI. It can turn into esterone. It can turn into an inert version of DHB. And it can turn into DHB, which DHB is about 3 times stronger than test. So most of the anabolic effect of EQ is actually the DHB that it converts into.
Wow. Interesting.
And then as the aromatase inhibitor builds up, less of it converts to the esterone and more of it converts to the DHB. That's why EQ gets better results the longer you're on it. So it's better for longer cycles.
Yeah. But it doesn't seem to be liver toxic to me. I never really noticed a lot of liver enzyme spikes on that, but then again,
correct.
So why is that though? Because DHB.
I have no idea. I have no idea why DHB pure causes the liver GGT to go up, but the EQ does not. However, we do know that the EQ can cause the RBCs to go up and all that other stuff along with the test. Now, the only flaw I have with that system is if someone has hair, if we're inhibiting the estrogen conversion, we're driving up the DHT production from that amount of test. So the chances are someone's going to lose some hair running 750 or 1,000 test, 600 or 800 EQ. You're going to have a lot more hair loss than with my method, which would be using lower test, relying on Masteron.
Right. No. So what is Masteron going to do other than act as an aromatase inhibitor that makes it? Because you seem to be very high on Masteron. You love Masteron.
Masteron is not an aromatase inhibitor. That's why I love it.
Oh.
It's a myth that it's an aromatase inhibitor. What it is it's an allosteric inhibitor on the estrogen alpha receptor. So it stops.
I meant to say it blocks estrogen receptors. I'm sorry. Yeah.
But it doesn't competitively block it. It doesn't block it at the binding site. It blocks it to some other mechanism. And because it has no binding affinity for either estrogen receptor alpha or beta, but it definitely causes the estrogen alpha breast ERA, BRCA cancers to shrink. The tumors shrink if they're prone to estrogen alpha.
Oh, so it almost acts like Novadex in that sense. Yeah.
Well, Novadex is also a misnomer because Novadex is a prodrug that converts into 4 different drugs in the body, it turns out. Some of them are SERMs and a couple of them are AIs. So really, when people talk about Novadex, what they really are thinking of is raloxifene. and that raloxifene is the one that's a pure SERM. But what's cool about the Masteron is it stops the feminizing effects of estrogen, but it doesn't stop the anabolic effects of estrogen. So the estrogen beta receptor is the one that drives up IGF-1 production from the GH and the bone formation. So by using Masteron, you can stop estrogen causing gyno, but you can still get the same amount of IGF-1 from a certain amount of GH.
Yeah, you know, it's funny you mentioned it. It brings up a point that I wanted to bring up. Back in the day, we you know, there was a study that came out, and that's why we all stopped using Nolvadex, because they said that Nolvadex inhibited IGF-1 production. And luckily, at that time, the aromatase inhibitors came out, so people started using Arimidex and Aromasin at that point. But you know, no one knew that Nolvadex did that. What's the mechanism that estrogen does that? I mean, that Nolvadex does that by?
So the Nolvadex converts into multiple different things. It converts into AIs and SERMs. So if it blocks the estrogen receptor beta is needed in the muscle to help facilitate the GH creating IGF-1. So the GH binds to the GH receptor. There's some downstream second messengers that occur. And then the estrogen binding to estrogen beta is a cofactor for the IGF-1 production.
I see. So
I have a study that I found about 10 or 11 years ago. It's on my website, toddleemd.com, under Dr. Lee's required reading, where it says estrogen is good for something. And I have the resources linked in the bottom. And it's I explain it in the article, but I have my references in the bottom. And in that one of those studies, it shows that estrogen receptor beta was found to increase strength, size, and IGF-1 production of muscle cells.
Wow. Wow.
So what I have coming out soon is a men's estrogen complex, which is going to cut down on the total amount of estrogen, completely block all of the estrogen alpha receptors, but stimulate the estrogen beta receptors so that people get as much or more IGF-1 out of their GH, but they don't have to worry about estrogen causing gyno. That way, if somebody doesn't have access to Masteron, Primo, if someone wants to do it the legalist way possible and use just testosterone, they could use this. And what's cool is inside of it, it also gums up DHT and eradicates it so that you could use twice as much test, keep the hair, keep the IGF-1, and not have to worry about gyno.
And that's using a prescription drug, or is that using a natural supplement?
This is over-the-counter stuff.
Wow.
So I've got a new line I'm starting. I just paid for the first run yesterday. It's going to be called Todd Lee MD Supplements. And it's a health line, whereas Valhalla Labs is a bodybuilding line, and it's got blood and axes and flames and shit on it. This is just a white label looking. It's got my logo. It looks as medicinal as possible with having a red dragon. Yeah.
Right. And you think it'll functionally work, you know, because usually natural supplements don't work the way they're.
So what's cool is everyone who's used my products from Valhalla Labs say your shit actually works. Yeah. So I went with the clinical max doses of every ingredient, and I also arranged them synergistically. So like my diet pill, Wrath of the Valkyrie, even though it's made, you can take all 4 pills, and that's the clinical doses of every ingredient. I don't know anyone who can handle 4 pills. 1 pill is plenty.
Why is it? It's too much stimulation?
No, I have no stimulants in it except for a little bit of caffeine. I put in T2 and a bunch of other stuff. It's just, they have so much energy from the fact that they're liberating so much fat, and they get so warm on it because I found natural uncouplers.
Uncoupling agent. Yeah, it's an uncoupling agent.
Yeah, I also had
I thought you can't use T2. I used T2 15 years ago, and I had to take it out of my product because I thought they made it illegal.
So it's not illegal, but there's people who are afraid to put it in products.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, when I first released it, people were drinking it from the bottle. So when I released it a second time, I put it in pill form because everybody's perfectly happy drinking from a bottle, but they think taking 5 pills is too many. It's so weird.
So
it's so weird the way people's brains work or don't work, as the case may be.
Yeah, well, I try to explain to people that if you're buying a multivitamin like a Centrum that's one a day, and they say it has 6,000 ingredients in there, there's probably not an effective dose of anything in there. It's pixie dust, because you can't fit the stuff into the capsule. You have to have multiple capsules to take effective dosages of vitamins and minerals,
Yeah, just my morning, the Todd Lee MD supplements morning vitamin is 12 caps.
Yeah, I'm 10 caps for V minerals.
Yeah. It's like there's no way they only fit 750 milligrams
I know.
so in a
People
cap.
don't understand it.
No, but as long as it's vegan compliant.
Yeah, that's all they care about. Yeah, I want to go back to growth hormone for a minute, because you're an advocate of taking higher dose GH.
Well, I talk about 2 units for HRT.
Right.
And then the medical community feels that 300 IGF-1 is a safe upper limit. Right. But if you're not concerned and you want the best results, then you would have to take more than 2 units to get over 300 in most people.
100% agree. Let me ask you this, though. When is the best time to test your blood to see what your IGF is? Because I think a lot of people don't have the timing right. And then they're like, I'm taking fake GH. I said, you tested the GH with the GH testing kit. I said, it's real. I said, I think you're just not taking the blood test properly, So
what I do tell people to do is, if you want to see the dosage of your GH, don't test IGF-1 for that. Test the GH itself. And all my panels on my mmlabs.com, my standard panel has GH on there and IGF-1. What you do is you shoot a whole bottle. So basically 10 units. Well, I mean, some brands like Viking Tropin are 18.86 IU per bottle. Serostim's 18, which is less. But the old fashioned bottles were 10 units. You shoot 10 units at, let's say, 8 a.m. Then you get the blood drawn at 11 a.m., 3 hours later, and your levels of GH should be 30 or higher. If it's 30 or higher, then you've got pharma grade GH, whether it was labeled pharma grade or not. There's plenty of underground labs that are pharma grade. FDA's criteria for pharma grade is 91% pure. Brands like Viking Tropin and Metatropin, which are underground, I don't like the term generic because they've got brands. They're not generic. They're testing at 98. Serostim tests 98. So if you're testing as good as the top brand in the world, you're certainly not a generic by any stretch of the imagination. And since the FDA's limit is 91 with a 4% dimer, I've never seen an underground GH test that poorly.
Okay. That's good to know.
To recap, because I kind of was long-winded, 10 units and then test your blood 3 hours later, the results should be 30.
Okay. And what about the IGF levels?
IGF levels, those last for 30 hours. So I find that because 30 hours, you take 5 half-lives. If the half-life is 30 hours, that's 150 hours. That's approximately 5 days, 6 days. So if you start using your GH at night on Sunday night, you can go in Friday morning or Saturday morning and get your IGF-1 levels tested, and that should be capped out.
Topped out, yeah, because they're right. They're not going to go higher than a certain amount, right?
Yeah, unless you change your dosage, right?
And I tell people that. I said, if you're taking, 10, 12 IUs a day, more than likely for most people, and I think you'd agree with this, but you can tell me if you know, you're wasting your money because you're taking GH and you're not even getting any benefits out of it. You just make yourself more insulin resistant at that point.
I think taking 10 units at once is a waste. I think if you take 4 units before bed and you want to take more units, you can take some in the morning. You basically want a 6-hour refractory window between injections.
Why do you like to take it at night? I'm a big advocate of the morning, and I'll tell you why.
The reason why I like it at night is because you have a higher conversion to IGF-1 at night, and also your liver produces more IGF-1 binding protein 3 at night, because normally your body releases the GH when you're sleeping, about 2 hours after you go to bed. So if you time your shot right so that you peak about 2 hours after you fell asleep, that's when you're going to get the most IGF-1. I think from 2 units generated 7.5 nanomoles in the day, but if you take it before bed, it generated 13 nanomoles of IGF-1.
I'm gonna just to give you a little pushback on this. I noticed it way better results when I took it in the morning, and my theory is that because you're the most catabolic in the morning, your cortisol level is the highest, and you don't produce GH in the morning. That's the time to take it because your body's releasing it naturally at night. Now, if you're taking a lot of GH, like you said, you have to split it up anyway. It doesn't matter because then you can take it morning and night. But I really think a dose in the morning makes you a lot more anabolic throughout the entire day. That's just the way I did it. And I found like I've tried it both ways. And I found that when I took it at night, it dropped my blood sugar and I would wake up like hypoglycemic too at night.
That's all true. So I'm not disagreeing that if someone's cutting and they're using less than 3 units, they shouldn't use it first thing in the morning if that's their only goal. But if that's their only goal is fat loss, why not just use GH frag? Why waste the money on GH?
You think the frag works? I really didn't see any results on that whatsoever.
I've never tried it because I always found that it's just as cheap to get GH as it is to get frag. But I would also never use less than 4 units. I would never use less than 8 units. So I personally do 2 units when I wake up, 2 units before I go to the gym, and 4 units before bed. And if I was to turn it up, I would go 3, 3, and 6. And the most I've ever used, the most I've ever used was 2, 2, and 24.
Wow.
And
24 at night? Oh my God. You didn't find it?
I took a year to build up to that though.
But so it's not like I just side effects like numbness of your hands or anything like that?
Not if you build up slow. The water retention effects you get is due to the aldosterone or the ADH or something to do with one of your renal angiotensin system. And if you go slow enough, your body doesn't detect the change.
It's interesting that you say that because you know what? When guys tell me they're getting pins and needles in their hands, I tell them to go off it for 3 days and then start up at half as much and build up to it again, and they don't have a problem. So I agree with you definitely there.
I always tell people you go up to a dose where you get a problem, then roll back to the previous safe dose.
What's your fasting blood sugars when you're on that much GH?
Honestly, before the 2024 Texas Pro Prep on 20 units of GH, I had 80 fasted glucose in the off season.
Now, why do you think you're just good? How old are you, first of all?
I'm turning 46 tomorrow.
So why do you think I look at a lot of blood sugars and blood work, guys. I mean, thousands, everyone sends me their blood. And there's a lot of people with high fasting blood sugars, and they're not even doing that much GH. Why do you think your blood sugars are not being affected negatively by all that GH?
Not sure. I don't really see that it's relevant. So I think the reason why people have high glucose, fasting glucose, is because they're insulin resistant. And I think the reason why they're insulin resistant is because they're thinking, I'm spending all this money on GH, I better eat enough to get something out of it. And then they are eating in a gross calorie surplus. So they build up intramuscular triglycerides, and that causes inflammation, and that drives up insulin resistance.
I don't agree with that. I'll tell you why, because I see this on people who are dieting for shows on no-carb diets or low-carb diets. I think, and most bodybuilders are not insulin resistant because exercise and the way we eat and train is not conducive to insulin resistance. It's conducive to insulin sensitivity. So I feel like it's a lack of insulin because we just eat so much food that the demand on the beta cells is so high. And then you throw some GH in there, which is antagonistic, and it causes, the body not to have to produce more insulin. The body just can't keep up. And so we see it, especially in guys' 30s, 40s. I start seeing these high fasting blood sugars, which is the initial warning sign. Hey, we can't keep up with insulin production. So it's amazing that you're normal. I expected you to say I'm a little high in the morning.
So I also, if I'm not going to bother with fasting glucose, now that they've got continuous glucose monitors that are so affordable, if someone's really serious, they should use a CGM, because what you'll find is, and what I found is that an hour before I wake up, my blood sugar spikes. And that's why I wake up. It's called the Smomogi effect, was the dawn effect, is that your glucose gets so low, cortisol is released for gluconeogenesis, and then when you wake up and test your glucose, now it's high. But if you had actually tested it in the middle of the night, it would have been low. So
Right.
I think that's
Right,
part
your body
of it.
should respond to
Metabolisms are so fast.
Right, but your body should respond to that spike in insulin production, in glucose production, by releasing insulin and lowering blood sugar. But it can't when it's basically being overtaxed. Is how I see it.
I usually see what I usually see is that their fasting glucose is normal and their fasting insulin starts rising, because I never order a fasting glucose without an HbA1c and a fasting insulin. And what I see is their fasting insulin starts creeping up. And when their fasting insulin's over 15, that's when I start seeing their fasting glucose go up over 80, over 90. Now they're insulin resistant.
Or not,
and their HbA1c is usually by a 5.6 by that point.
Right. I notice high fasting blood sugars, and I see it completely mirrored in the A1C values. They're going up 5.6, 5.7, and that's to me, that's a warning sign. Hey, we got to address this, because you start going higher than that, you're gonna be on insulin for the rest of your life. So I find that a long-acting, and I just wanted to get your opinion, a long-acting insulin actually makes people grow better, because you're giving the body now enough extra insulin. It's like taking a testosterone replacement dose. You're giving the body enough extra insulin to be able to absorb the food efficiently and to manage blood sugar properly. And you don't need to use a fast-acting insulin, which is what we did back in my day. We used a fast-acting insulin. We didn't know any better. I feel like a long-acting insulin is almost should be part of the whole protocol if you're doing high amounts of GH.
Your old protocol of 10 units of Lantus in the morning and then using maybe 1 to 3 units of Humalog pre and post lift was a mainstay the world over. And I think the reason why Milos never adopted it is because he didn't have Lantus. So you pretty much were the pioneer in how to properly use glucose management. However, recently we had access to retatrutide. And with retatrutide, I feel that makes the use of insulin no longer necessary. And for example, I was using 50 units of insulin a day. And this was after the Texas Pro. I was full-blown diabetic. That one prep fucked me up bad. I had like a 600 fasting glucose for the week after.
So you did have problems with fasting glucose.
But it wasn't from the GH, because I had a GH of 26 going into the prep and a 80 fasting glucose. When prep started, all the inflammation from the prep, that's what gave me the insulin resistance. So after the show, I had, for all off season, I was using 40, 50 units of Lantus a day. And barely controlling it with a 136 average glucose and like a 6.1 HbA1c. I went on 1 milligram of retatrutide, 1 dose. And the very next day, with no insulin, I had a 96 average glucose. And I've been using 1 milligram of retatrutide on my high days, which 2 a week. So 2 milligrams a week with retatrutide. And my glucose has been completely fine with no insulin since.
First of all, Lantus is not a true 24-hour insulin. So if anyone's using Lantus, you definitely should take 2 shots a day of it. Now we know that.
I did half in the morning, half at night.
Okay, Tresiba and Toujeo are actually true 24-hour insulins. But getting back to with the retatrutide, and I'm a big believer in the GLP-1 agonist, especially for people who cheat on their diet, because it does take the hunger away. My concern is with it, not concern, as far as bodybuilders go, it's kind of like a lazy way of controlling things. And the reason I don't like it is that it slows the transit of stuff through the intestinal tract. Obviously, you got to take a fiber supplement with that. I mean, I have no problem, because I make the #1 fiber supplement. Everyone's on fiber.
Fiberlize, everyone. Get it at speciesnutrition.com.
Everyone uses fiber, which is great. But I worry in the off season, is that going to inhibit people's ability to grow, because you're not absorbing your food as quickly, and it's slowing down the transit. I think pre-contest, it's great, but I don't think it should be something that people use all year round.
I think a safe approach, and I think Eric Janicki talked about this too, is 0.25 a day. Some other people like Chase Iron says 0.5 every other day. I think that's less than the minimum dose. I think that's a great way of helping control lipids, insulin resistance, etc. in the off season without it really affecting your appetite. Plus, if you
follow per week, you say per week or per day?
Per week, like 0.25 a day
Yeah.
0.25 a day ends up to being less than the 2 milligrams per week.
Okay. So you're taking the retatrutide daily?
I take mine on my high days because I'm in prep. So after a high day, like if I have 400 carbs on Monday, I'll do 1.5 milligrams, and then I'm not hungry again until Friday when it's my next high day. But for somebody in the off season, you use way less and you don't have the appetite suppression. And it hasn't affected my digestion at all. And none of these supposed side effects. I think people are extrapolating semaglutide and tirzepatide side effects to retatrutide where they just aren't there.
Well, retatrutide is essentially tirzepatide with an added glucagon agonist, so I mean, it's the same thing.
On paper, yeah, it is. But the actual subjective experience that people are having is that it's just all good, no bad. So I don't know why. It's not I'm not a GI expert. I'm a hormone expert, but
bodybuilders
I find it's easy.
Todd, bodybuilders can rationalize anything. As soon as Nick Walker said he used retatrutide, everyone and their mother wants to use retatrutide now. Even the people who don't need it. People are like, have you tried it? I'm like, have you looked at me recently? I'm striated glutes. I'm 200 pounds. What do I need retatrutide for? I said, I don't take drugs for the sake of taking them. There's got to be a reason why you take them,
The only reason why I took it was because I wanted to cure my diabetes. I didn't do it because I had a sudden onset diabetes, which was pancreatic insufficiency and insulin resistance, which the medical community is calling 1.5 when it's not. It's 1 and 2, so technically it's 3. But I completely cured it with retatrutide, and I'll probably have to use it for the rest of my life, but I'm totally cool with that. And I was using the prophylactic approach of doing the Lantus all day, every day, and all the stuff I was supposed to be doing. It's just that when you're eating 800-900 carbs a day, you're going to get diabetes eventually. That's why I prefer doing it Ella's way, Scientific Snitch, where she reset the term for calorie surplus so that instead of maintenance being body weight maintenance, it's body fat maintenance, and that there's really no reason to be in a surplus. But you have to account for the amount of calories you need to grow muscle in your TDEE. So if your TDEE with the old way of thinking was 3,700 calories, then your TDEE with you accounting for how many calories needed to grow muscle is probably 3,800 to 3,850. So it's not even a 5% surplus. It's like 100 calorie surplus. And when you eat like that all off season, you're not going to get fat. So you don't have to diet as hard. So you're not going to lose muscle. And this is the easiest prep I've ever done because I did Ella's style of off season going into this prep.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that anyone gets excessively fat. There's no reason for that. I mean, I usually calculate a person's protein and fat needs, and then I vary the carbs based on whether they're flat or they're too fat, and then I cut them back or raise them.
So it's funny you say that so it's like the vertical diet with the carbs, right? So what's funny is I say the same thing about Test and GH and Masteron, that Test is like your fats, GH is like your protein. They don't change. Once you receptor map it, your levels are your levels, and the Masteron is what you go up and down with, just like carbs. If you're not growing, add more Masteron.
It's an interesting theory, but I'm going to go on record as saying this right now. Number one, I think you're doing too much GH, and I think you're going to fuck your blood sugar control up
with 8 units.
With 8 units, I think long term, I think you're better off going a little lower.
Okay,
and especially with some of the recommendations, I think that's too high for most people. I think it's going to mess up their blood sugar. And number two is that if you're going to take the retatrutide, I think you should also have some like Tresiba or Toujeo on board as well. Because I think your pancreas is being stressed more than you think. Even though you might be showing kind of normal fasting blood sugars, I think your body's under.
I'm averaging about 75, 80. Average, not even fasting.
Oh, really? That's pretty good though. Are you dieting now?
I'm 13 weeks out.
Oh, that's why you're dieting. Yeah. But I think off season you might want to consider taking.
Off season I will run a basal level of Lantus or twice a day for sure.
Right. Or try Toujeo. I've been doing Toujeo. It's a U300 insulin. It's concentrated. For some reason, when they concentrate the insulin, it works better. And my blood sugars are like, I could eat whatever I want.
I'd have to get my hands on some of that then.
You get a prescription, you know, doctors will write a prescription. I have an actual prescription for it, you know, because if you can show the doctors that you have I mean, you're a doctor yourself. You can say, hey, look, I have high blood sugars. I don't want to wait till I'm a full-blown diabetic. I'm taking this prophylactically. I think that you're absolutely justified in taking a long-acting insulin.
Well, and I want to point out that the things I do as a professional bodybuilder are not the things that I have patients or clients do, right, whether they're a lifestyle patient on HRT or whether it's a state level bodybuilder. That doesn't mean I happen to have like an Irish liver. I can get away with way more drugs. I'm a hypo responder, but a hyper tolerator. That I've ran as much as 450 Masteron a day, no problems. Ran 200 Tren a day, no problem. So my body can handle shit. Like I don't have the genes to grow muscle, but I have the genes to survive drug abuse.
You could drink 12 beers a day and not have cirrhosis in your liver. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What do you think is the best combination of liver detoxification supplementation?
So, you know, IV glutathione is the king. Then short of that, I would say liposomal glutathione, NAC.
How do you take it? How much do you take a day?
The solution I have is in volume, which people are going to laugh at me because I always make fun of people who do stuff by volume. I could go get it from the other room, but I was like, don't ever fucking tell me how many cc's you do. Tell me how many milligrams. But I actually don't know how much is actually the active amount of glutathione off the top of my head. I have a 5 milliliter oral syringe that I fill up with the solution.
It's usually 200 milligrams per ml. That's usually the.
I can go get it if you want me to. I'll be right back.
Yeah, why not? Let's see what you're doing. I'm interested. I take 200 milligrams every day, and I find that that works really well. But I have gone to clinics where they've actually pushed like 9 grams of glutathione into me through an IV, and I felt like almost high from it. And I have to imagine that you know, doing that every so often is not a bad idea. But I think on a regular basis, if you do something daily, 200 milligrams is more than adequate to give you the heavy metal detoxification, the anti-inflammatory effect of the liver detoxification that you get with the glutathione.
All right, so this is what I use. It's called trisomal glutathione, and it is L-glutathione reduced and S-acetyl L-glutathione blend. That's 175 milligrams. And it also has 125 of N-acetylcysteine, and it's a liposomal preparation.
Oh, so you do it in your mouth then?
Yeah, sublingually. I always do everything sublingually.
I'm shocked that you don't inject it. You're an injector. So
right now I'm ordering the glutathione and the IV bag and the tubes and shit. And I have a chair and a towel, and I'm just gonna fucking have my.
That's what I want to do.
Myself.
9 grams of it. Try 9 grams. Yeah. You'll be like high as a kite. It's unbelievable.
I'm gonna go with 5 grams of vitamin C and whatever 20 grams of glutathione and squeeze the bag and shit. And I was like, more DHB for the DHB god. And I was just like, how much of this shit can I put in my body so I can use more DHB? That's going to be the key.
I got to tell you, we got to come back and do part 2 of this because this was, I really enjoyed this. And I always say I try to learn something every day. And I actually learned a lot from this interview with you. Especially
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
About how it works. I did not have any idea that, you know, about the conversion of DHB and the way it works. And it makes a lot of sense why I always found that I got really good results with test and EQ. And all the clients that I work with on a daily basis, you know, I have them on that and they get great results. So it makes sense. I'm glad that you were able to elucidate the mechanism that worked by. And I hope the people watching this really appreciate, you know, the knowledge that you imparted.
And remember, guys, pound for pound, EQ is 6 times cheaper than Primo, and DHB is 14 times cheaper than Primo. When you count the actual potency and multiply it through by how concentrated the solution is and by its street cost, that Primo is throwing your money away. I actually did the math. And for the amount of money, if you switch from Primo and Serostim to like EQ and Viking Tropin, with the money that you're saving, you could get a $500,000 house and a McLaren.
Yeah, isn't it sad that people will spend that much money on Seristan GH, but they'll be too cheap to to buy a Netflix subscription for themselves?
Yep. I always say it's like, do you want to pull up and take a girl home with you in a McLaren to your McMansion? Or do you want to drive up in a rusted F-150 to your trailer? And she's like, are you fucking kidding me? It's like, yeah, baby, but I use Seristan and Primo. It's like, guess who's not getting their dick sucked? It's like,
hey, Todd, thank you so much. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Instagram at Todd Lee MD. Everything. TikTok is at Todd Lee MD. YouTube channel is Dr. Todd Lee's Anabolic University. That's where I have the full-length videos. The reels are cute, but they're an advertisement for the real length video. You can't say a whole lot in 90 seconds. Let's be real.
You're doing great stuff, great information. It's all free out there. Check it out at all his social media and YouTube modalities and channels. Thank you so much for coming on. We're going to get you back. For now, we are out of time. I'm Dave Palumbo with Dr. Todd Lee for another installment of Guru Talk.